Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar show that talks about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of transformation, of awakening to our purpose, of realizing that maybe there's more to this thing than meets the eye. And I love having all of the guests on the show that we can really share our stories and learn from each other. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I love helping people to make those first steps and along the way, those expanded steps along the journey of really understanding what their life is all about at a deeper level, more than just the surface, deeper into the ocean, to really uncover the gems that are lying there, even hidden inside the traumas are these beautiful gifts of gold. And when you can claim those and make that your medicine, that's amazing. That's a life well lived. And so I help people to do that, to take that journey. And I love Soul Nectar Show as my platform to really engage in that conversation every single week. So today I'm really excited to have on the show my friend Yvonne Silver. Welcome to the show, Yvonne.
Thank you, Carrie. Great to be here.
So glad you're here. So Yvonne is a confidence catalyst and the founder of Women and Wisdom Media and Flourish. Yvonne is a speaker, executive coach, and mentorship expert, and she's actually a chartered professional HR consultant and the author of the overnight bestseller, Words, Wisdom, and Wisdom, the Modern Art of Confident Conversations. She teaches women entrepreneurs and leaders to flourish in business by mastering their confidence and refining their authentic voice so they can have more sales and grow their team for sustainable business. So, and I know also that Yvonne is so much more than that, because really your story is so inspiring. With the chaos in your own life that you have experienced with your special needs son, Alex, and following in your own entrepreneurial footsteps. So letting him use his artistic talent to sell his paintings and raise money for Operation Smile surgeries. Yvonne also speaks at conferences and shares insights, including One Woman Fearless Summit and BPW National Conference and Lead with Purpose Conference. And podcasts. So, of course, including mine, Soul Nectar Show. And you have your own Words Wisdom show on BBS radio, which I've also been on. So welcome to the show. So tell me more about your journey to find your purpose, Yvonne.
Yeah, well, the most significant piece happened actually about 4 years ago. Just to put everything in context, I actually grew up in England, and I grew up in a household with a mom who I call my first unmentor. And I call her that because she inadvertently showed me the path of stepping into being a more confident woman, but by what she didn't do. So I grew up in a household that was two parents, part of the Second World War. My dad was in Dunkirk. He took a bullet and he came back with PTSD. And at the time, I just thought he was really, really angry and mad all the time, but it was actually quite sick. And of course, they didn't treat thousands of men coming back from the war back then. There was just way too many to treat. And so I watched my mom's power gradually get drained out of her. I mean, he literally drained the dignity right out of her with his angry ways and his illness. And so all my life, I was striving to be the person that he thought I should be. And eventually that sort of crashed about 4 years ago when I burned out in my career. At the time, I was doing some coaching work, but I was also doing some HR consulting work. And I had one experience that caused me to really look at who I was serving and how I was supporting them. And it was like a kick in the stomach. There's a longer story. I'm happy to share it if you would like, let me know. But it really caused me to question, what was I doing? And I stepped back. I took 3 months off because I really felt like I was just burning right out. And that was because I wasn't living on purpose. I wasn't working with my ideal clients, and I wasn't doing the kind of work that really invigorates me. So that was my turning point. And since then, I've been doing a lot more meditation. I took Reiki. I worked with an energetic resonant coach and really tried to pull all of the things that I knew about myself that were my strengths into the limelight. Yeah.
Wow, that is so powerful that you're sharing about the influence your mother had on you and your own self identity and concept. That we struggle with things that we witness in our childhoods, from our parents, and especially I feel like our mother figure is so important to our growth, and because she's teaching us, we kind of model ourselves after our mother, as women, and she's teaching us how to be in the world. But then at a certain point, we kind of get to this place where um, we are ready to establish our own identity, around like somewhere in the teenage hoods, and then things sort of get messy for a while and maybe forever, you know, depending on the mom and the daughter. But so, how was your journey of confidence? Because I just know from my own journey with confidence that, um, I had a different situation than yours, but I had a challenge finding my own confidence because my mom didn't actually know her own strength, and I was a really sensitive child.
Mm,
So I didn't know how to have my own voice within that relationship.
yeah.
And it's could have been a lifelong journey for me to have that. So, but confidence in your case might be slightly different.
Yeah. Well, I do have your beautiful book. Loving reading that.
Oh,
So I
great.
do have a little bit of a sense, perhaps more of a sense of your upbringing than you do of mine yet. But in essence, my mum was a working professional, and she was 42 when she had me. So she'd lived quite a lot of her life already, and yet she still got the life literally drained out of her. My dad, she taught my dad to drive. He took the car keys, wouldn't let her drive the car. So by limiting and restricting her freedom, he started to gradually diminish her power. And then everything that she said, he'd have a criticism about it. He gave her very, very little housekeeping money. She really had to, juggle a lot of balls to actually have enough food in the house for everybody. So it just really gradually diminished her. So I could have grown up modeling that. For some reason, I had another spark in me that said, I'm darn well not going to be growing up like that. And it actually came to a head when I was 11. In England, they used to have the 11 plus exam, which determined whether you went to the grammar school where the smart kids went, or the secondary school where the not so smart kids went. And I flunked it. I flunked it by 2 marks. I'm not a scholar. I wasn't then. And I remember my dad being furious. I mean, he literally had, black eyes, red face. He opened the envelope, and as soon as he read what was on it, he was just hopping mad because I'd flunked and I wasn't going to be going to the same school as my smart sister, who was 3 years older than me. And he told me literally then, you will never ever be successful. I mean, he screamed it at me. You'll never
Wow.
ever be successful in life. And I carried that, darn well going to prove you wrong attitude and that energy of aggressiveness versus assertiveness for a long, long time.
Yeah, aggressive versus assertive, because you feel like you have to claim it for your like not just claims too gentle. Like, take it,
Yeah,
for yourself.
yeah. I
And
was chasing it madly. I was not gonna, I was not gonna let that label stick. And in essence, what I did was I was chasing it so hard that it did end up sticking because I pushed people away because I was being too aggressive.
yeah, that aggressiveness actually it's uncomfortable for people to be around. I know when we as women, we don't know our power. This is what I've learned from my own journey. When we don't actually know how powerful we are, then we end up affecting people around us in a way to push them away. And then we don't really know why, because we think we're not that powerful. So we don't understand why this person, is reacting the way that they are.
Yeah,
So it's actually the softening that ends up being more powerful in the end, right? Like being able to soften yourself and relax and into more of a feminine place, which I feel like, the masculine energy is very like, penetrate and claim it and do it. And we're really good at that energy. I think when we've had a situation, maybe with a mom that didn't look or give us a way of being feminine about claiming what we want,
yeah, yeah. She was
then
very prim and proper. very traditional English, very polite, you know, went to church, you know, wore nice string of pearls, always had a lipstick on, you know, always looked great. So from the outside, nobody would know what was going on inside, the turmoil. And she ultimately ended up with dementia when she was about 65 and passed away at 82. So, you know, as I said, I learned a lot from her, but we weren't especially close because she was so different than the person that I wanted to be. And, you know, I had my first little business going when I was age 6. So that spark was already in my DNA. I was being paid by the local, one of the local seniors to dog walk her, do some exercise for her dogs when she broke her ankle. And I volunteered to do it. And she said, well, how much do you want me to pay you, dear? I was like, oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, I got a job.
6pence, right? And that was my first business. But that energy of you know, trying to push and trying to make things happen carried through. So right before I had that burnout, I was very planful. Like I'd have my annual plan broken down into quarters, into months, into weeks, into days, and I was very much working that plan. But what I was doing, and I didn't realize at the time, I was trying to force things to happen that the universe didn't have in mind for me. I was trying to push other people to do things so that they would be able to help me unfold my plan, instead of me deciding I'm going to do this and this and this, and therefore the outcome of that should relate to XYZ, and this is how I'm going to build my business. But take responsibility for my own actions, and only those.
Wow, that's really good insight. So as you're working with women in confidence, like what are some of the key things that you've realized are a factor in
Yeah. Well,
confidence with women?
Well, this is, yep, you can see it behind me, my book, Words, Women and Wisdom, The Modern Art of Confident Conversations. I decided that it was time to write a book, so that was one of the things on my bucket list, and really spent about a month figuring out, you know, what do I want to claim as my area of expertise? What are the things I know my clients tell me I'm great at all the time? And what's the biggest question that they come up with? And they always ask about, how can I be more confident? How can I have more confidence? So that was where I started, and thinking about what processes and practices I was sharing with them that were consistently getting them results, and I was repeating it over and over and over. So now it's time to, you know, spread that to a bigger audience. So in the book, there's actually 40 different words and word concepts. Some of them are pretty simple things like but, right? So, you know, if you're using a sentence, you know, but is that word in the middle that very often will cut it apart. People don't hear the first thing that they're hearing, they only hear the second part. So, Kerry, you have a beautiful sweater on today, but I can see that XYZ, right? You only hear the second part. Sometimes it's a word like just, you know, oh, I just wanted to XYZ. Well, that word is unnecessary. You just diminish the power of the sentence by having just in it. It's like, please, please, you know. And then there's other concepts that I've learned, particularly drawing on my human resources field, like appreciative inquiry, which is something that's pretty common in HR, not so commonly known outside of that field. So, for example, with I think, you know, there might be some listeners out there who also have their own businesses. You know, you could go to a potential client meeting and ask them, you know, tell me about your biggest challenge, looking for that sort of pain point of where to start the conversation of, and then lead it into something that you can help them with. What I like to do is, leveraging from David Cooperrider's work on appreciative inquiry, is to actually start with appreciating where they're at and then inquiring how it could be even better. So the conversation is very much a switch of energy from something negative, what's your biggest challenge, to a positive energy of collaboration right from the beginning of the conversation. And it sounds like, hey, Kerry, you know, tell me a little bit more about what's working really well in your business already. You share, and then, how could that be even better? And then you talk about some future statements. And then my response to that is, you sound like you're doing some really interesting things. Can I share a little bit about what I'm up to? And we could see maybe how I could help support you get to your goals faster. I've never had anyone say no to that, because there's nothing to object to. you're sharing what's great already. You're sharing a future statement of what could be. And I'm just saying, hey, I could maybe make it better. And so it's futuristic. And so no one gets their back up. Whereas if you ask someone, tell me about your greatest challenge, very often you see the energy drain right out of them. They don't want to talk about that horrible thing that's happening in their business that they created by a bad decision a few months ago. And that's not a great place to start a collaborative partnership of any kind. So those are just a few examples. Using could instead of should is a very simple one I very often use to explain it as well. Again, it's that should is that energy of obligation. I've got to do this. I don't want to do it, but I really should. Or if you tell someone you should do this, it comes with that judgment tone, versus you could is possibility. It's open, it's airy, it's free. So those are just a few things in the book.
I love that. And I also am aware that it's an energy too, like it's an energy of that goes along with it, underlying it. Like there's so much communication that's nuanced that happens. I think it's only like 7% is words or something like that. And
Yep.
it's the energy that you deliver the words. And if you work with women a lot, which you do, you kind of see how sometimes the same sentence and different energies or different lips coming forward has a totally different receiving of that statement.
Yeah. There's actually the very last chapter, chapter 8, is when no words are even required. So I talk about things like first impressions. I talk about how you show up at meetings, what decisions you make about the restaurant that you want to meet your potential client in, or your date in. That whole piece about dressing for success. So do you wear something that's sort of loose and flowery or ready to go, or do you wear something that's pinstripes? What's the role that you are playing in that meeting, and how do you want to be perceived? Because before you even open your mouth, the person is going to look you up and down, and subconsciously, whether they are planning to or not, they will make a judgment about, are you showing up in the way that they thought that they would greet you? Or are you different from the impression they had in their mind of who they were meeting? Do you sound like the person they thought they were meeting? Do you look like them? Are your ideas coming through in your questions, or are you showcasing by just talking? Very interesting.
That is interesting. So what you've been really working with is in your own life then is this ability to communicate in a way that it can be received, in a way that you can actually communicate your message and the other person can hear what you're saying. I'm very aware of like what happens when you grow up in a situation where there's somebody very critical, like where somebody's constantly criticizing and pointing out the flaws and the negativity.
Right.
And you can feel like stripped bare. You can really feel like worthless, at the end of the day with all of that hammering criticism.
Yeah.
So what it sounds like, you've had your own journey with that, and you've been able to find ways of communicating that doesn't trigger that negative loop in another person.
Yep. And I did learn it. I did learn it very early on, because I also grew up in a house, as I said, my dad was criticizing my mum all the time. Well, I left home at 16 because he was criticizing me so much. I mean, I couldn't do anything right. He didn't like it when I was at home because I was, painting my toenails or whatever. And he didn't like it if I was out gallivanting around where he didn't know what I was up to. So there was no pleasing him. So I left at 16 and went on my journey. But it does really impact you later on, because I found that I was asking for permission a lot, even when I was a VP in a corporate role, global talent management organization. When I first started working with my new boss, I found that I was asking for permission all the time. And that was, again, giving away my power, because then if I asked, there was a 50% chance I could get a yes, a 50% chance I could get a no. So what I learned with my dad was I wasn't going to give him the power of saying no to me. So I would give him two choices. I would say, I can be home at this time, or I could do this, and he would pick one of those two. And I didn't know that that's a very common sales technique at the time, but it worked, because that way I would increase my chances of getting a yes, instead of a 50% chance of getting a no. And so I carried that same theme on, into my career later on, usually giving people choices, but I had still been carrying that underlying hole in my confidence, where I felt like I needed to ask permission when I got criticized for something. So in that role, I ended up deciding I'm not going to ask for permission. I'm just going to ask for forgiveness if I need to. And again, that's part of what I share in the book. Don't give away your power by asking, just do it. And then if you need to, you can always apologize.
That's really powerful, because a lot of women do get stuck in that space of feeling like they've got to have permission from some authority figure in order to do the thing that's in their heart that they want to do.
Yep.
That actually is a block to actually even getting started on something. Like, you say you have an idea and you're like, oh, I want to be in service to this community, and I want to do this new program. Well, it would even be a block to figuring out, to getting started on the new program, to even thinking or dreaming about it, because you're wondering, like, who do I need to ask permission from in order to do this? Like,
Yep.
who am I going to do? Who's going to hire me to do it?
Yeah.
Right. But you got that entrepreneurial spirit, which is totally different.
Well, as I said, my dog walking experience at 6 led into, I was painting and buying and fixing up bikes, push pedal bikes, painting them funky colors and taking all the rust off with a Brillo pad and then reselling them. I did some of that. I was doing a paper route, a paper round, they call it in England. At 11, I was in the store. By 12, I was the assistant manager. By 13. So, I mean, I really threw myself into this desire to be successful in a way that felt good to me and proved my dad wrong. But certainly, just like anybody who's probably been on this show before, I mean, we're all doing our soul work along the way. It's like peeling back a flower. In coaching, they very often say it's, get to the center of the onion. Well, I'd rather be a flower that, you keep revealing through the petals, and the petals keep expanding and growing. So I did a lot of work over the years, with people like Harv Eker, with Warrior Camp, with Jack Canfield and his team, and coaching with Jane Warlow. And I mean, I've done lots of work working with my Reiki practitioner and coach for that as well. And then also taking some of those learnings and translating it into what did I learn about myself, and sharing that wisdom back. So when I wrote the book, yes, it's my journey, but it's also, there's 15 other ideas that I garnered from talking to other confident and influential women, some of whom such as, you might also know Melinda Whitstock with Wings of Inspired Business, with Teresa de Grosbois. I interviewed Jenny Abdullah-Gulamani, the BPW president for Canada, and a number of other women who had already demonstrated confidence that wanted to share their nuggets as well. So it's a great read, a great Christmas present. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so when you face your own feelings within yourself, like, say you enter into a situation with somebody where you notice that this woman maybe feels a little defensive. You want to get to know her, and you want to be closer, and you want to, do some work with her, but she might be a little bit, that aggressive thing you were talking about before.
Yeah.
What are some ways that, if you're, for the audience, if you're if you're kind of noticing somebody has that aggressive feeling, or how can we soften that? How can we build a bridge to that for someone?
Yeah. That's actually a lot of what's in my book, is those bridge concepts. So how can you open the conversation in a way that is showing your feminine, nurturing, empathetic side, and yet still getting to the heart of the matter in a confident, firm way? So in that instance, I love the opening question, I'm curious, can you share a little more about? And I'm curious, when you're coming from, when you're telling someone, I'm coming from a place of curiosity, it's very different than just going straight into, can you tell me about, which could be seen as judgmental, especially when you have a powerful energy. So I'm curious, can you share a little more about? And that's an easy way to demonstrate that you are wanting to reciprocate, you're willing to be open, you want to hear them, you want to learn more about them and understand them. And that's where I start.
Yeah, I've also realized that the tone is everything, and sometimes people can read a lot of things into your words
Yeah.
when you're speaking. That's what I've realized. A long history with my mom of trying to speak something, and even the inflection in my voice or the way that I was saying it was getting misinterpreted, or would kind of like provoke almost an anger response.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just learned that sometimes women can be prickly. I've learned that it could be scary to try to have a conversation with someone who feels defensive, that's a very treacherous space to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is, asking, there are times when asking permission is going to help with the bonding experience. So if your teenager, comes rushing in the door and they're late and they're looking like they've, been dragged through a hedge backwards and you have no idea what they've been up to. I mean, you could sort of ask the question right then and there, where have you been? What have you been doing? You look, you look a bit disheveled. You've been out all night. And at that moment in time, they're probably already feeling guilty about coming home late. They know that they look like they've, been, I don't know, doing what. So timing is everything. If you let it slide and just say, I'm really glad you got home safely. I'm not sure what's been happening this evening, but I'm so glad you're home. Perhaps we can chat tomorrow. Have a great night. And then go back to that conversation and just say, I really want to have an understanding of, how you were out last night with XYZ, and if everything's okay, is this a good time to talk about it? And if it's not, she'll tell you. And if it is, then you can get into the conversation. But by pigeonholing people, it's almost like a cornered rat will attack, right? Because the timing is off. So there's so many different pieces of conversation: the timing, the tone, the energy behind it, the intention behind it is the most important piece for me. If your intention is to nag on someone, they're going to feel that coming across. If your intention is to be kind and empathetic or sympathetic, they're going to feel that as well. So it's always good to set the intention for the conversation before you go into it, and then you'll find that your body language and your style will naturally align with that.
Yeah, and I think being clear about your intention is also really important, as well as, let's say it's a difficult conversation, making sure that you're clear within yourself. Because sometimes what I've realized through my work is that sometimes if something triggers me, I used to blame it on the other person and say, oh, that's all their fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned, of course, in my spiritual journey that that's not really true. Like, if it triggered me, it's because there's something going on in me that
Yeah.
needs my attention. I need to look at it. I need to address it. So in this kind of work now, what I do is I sort of realize, okay, um, this thing triggered me. I've got to resolve that part that triggered me, release my feelings. Maybe if I was angry, I could go for a run or something and just kind of release it, do some journaling, process, figure out what's going on with me before I even initiate any kind of conversation with another
Yep.
person. Or like, let's say I get caught off guard and I'm with that other person. I could say something like, wow, what's in the space right now for me is I'm feeling this, and I'm going to need some time to process that before I be really, really ready to have a conversation with you about it.
Yeah. That's so true. And one of the concepts in the book is actually the concept um, of creating a new space. So I think very often, because we are taught as little girls to be a good girl, to be friendly, to be, you know, warm, to be accepting, to be willing to please, that when we get a request, very often we forget that we can actually say no to it, or we can say not now if we're not ready. So there's an interrupt opportunity. So if you're in you know, in a meeting with somebody and something comes at you that you weren't ready for and prepared for, but particularly for women, depending on what's going on that day or our time of the month, that could just trigger tears right away, which for women, other women understand that, you know, it's just an emotional expression, but very often the men in the room don't understand what's going on and don't know how to handle tears, women in tears. So to have an interrupt strategy where before you even go into the meeting or the event, so that if you get triggered, you can just say, that's really interesting. I want to have some time to think about it. I'll get back to you. You've shut the conversation down. You haven't said when you're going to get back to them. You haven't said any more about why you're feeling the way you're feeling. You've just said, I need time to think about this. And then you can take a few deep breaths and then come back. The other thing is sometimes it does make sense to, you know, I always say have a glass of water with you wherever you know, if you're in a meeting, wherever. And you know, I have in the past purposely knocked water over the desk. So it gave me a reason to get up and excuse myself and go to the bathroom so I could collect my thoughts for a minute. And it's a perfectly natural thing that a glass of water could easily get spilled. But I needed time to stop, not react, and choose how I was going to respond in that situation.
Wow, that's so amazing that you premeditated that. I would have never thought about having a glass of water. That's really amazing.
Well, it's so simple. And yet it gives you so much more opportunity. I mean, first of all, it's not hot, right? If it's a cold glass of water, so sipping it could cool you down. It's not going to give you a hot flush. But also you can use that to pause. So if someone asks you a question, you say, you take a sip of water and you figure out the answer as you're sipping the water. And it's, again, it's a natural flow of conversation. It's not where all of a sudden you're saying, I don't know the answer, just a moment.
Right.
And there's actually some research in the book that talks about sipping water and how that affects the body. So yeah, it's interesting.
That is really interesting. You know, my dad used to say he used to work for big companies like computer company, Dell, and Digital, and all that. And he would travel to manufacturing facilities where he never spoke the language. But so he started paying attention to body signals, and he started noticing that whenever he was making a point, because he could just make points without understanding the language and people would understand. I don't know how he did all that, but anyway, he would do it. And then he said, whenever people agree or they're really in agreement with you, if you drink, then they'll drink too. Like that's just like there's like a mirroring thing that happens. So there's a way in which too that you can watch people's body language is really important part of communication.
Yeah, and that's part of that chapter when no words are even required. I mean, it's, you can mirror their pace, their excitement level, what they're doing with their hands, if they're a hand talker, if they're leaning back in their chair, doing more evaluation, if they're leaning forward because they're more eager. So when no words are required, I talk about what I call the power pause, which is that, again, let's cut this conversation in half. I'm going to give myself the benefit of the pause, using your energy more intentionally, leveraging the silence, presence and body language, wardrobe and image for career advancement, how first impressions matter, and then about choices and timing. So again, the choice of restaurant that you pick to meet your client at is going to send them a message.
You know, it's so interesting because I've been doing this research on healing the mother wound. And I've been using this book called Daughter Detox by Peg Streep. And it's a really fascinating book. She's got a lot of research in there. But she talks about this this experiment that these researchers conducted to notice babies and how they react when their mom doesn't pay attention to them and like looks away or, you know, isn't engaging. And when a mom is like too engaged, right? Like when the baby's giving the cue, like, no, I don't want that right now. And the mom goes in anyway.
Right.
It's like violating their space. So there's a lot of things that we don't even realize that we've learned through those early interactions with our mother, depending on how well she understood body language and how well she understood how to interact with you as a child, as a baby, is really big on how you understand people's boundaries and how you understand whether to lean forward or when to do that or how to perceive. Like these are all, it's kind of fascinating to me right now because I like, wow, like people, like I've had to learn a lot. I actually am really sensitive to people because I had a situation where my mom was not consistent, right? Like I mean, none of us are 100% consistent. Otherwise we'd be robots, right? So like, but there is a way with women, and I think this is a common experience where women can have powerful emotions. Like, so women can be really emotional or really, really angry or really sad or really happy or really this or really that, like, and you never know which one it's going to be, and it can flip like that. And I think a lot of women experience that flow of emotion. But as a child, that can be really unpredictable too. And I think that's why for me, like I appreciated my dad because he was so steady. In my case, I had a dad that was really, really steady.
Yeah.
So I knew I could trust that. Like I knew the kind of reaction or response I was likely to get, and it was very consistent. Very rarely did it fall out of my expectation.
Yeah.
So it was easier to open in that environment and be received, and be trusting. Whereas
Yeah.
with my mom, I never really was sure what was going to happen, except probably something scary, because, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I think that, I think this is actually an issue for a lot of women, not knowing how to proceed with other women and how to approach people in a way to get the best result, because we are so emotional and sensitive.
Yeah, I think that, for women in particular, because we are so intuitive, we're empathetic. I just did a session, another of my Bold Women Leaders sessions here in Calgary. And I always bring up a slide that shows some research which incorporates what are the 10 competencies that women bring to leadership, where they're actually more effective as leaders than men are. So that intuitive side, that nurturing, that caring piece, in order to do that well, we need to build trust within the team. And there's some great research from 3 female doctors at Center for Creative Leadership that I really love, which is 3 easy things to remember. How do you build trust with other people, particularly with women? And it's 3 C's. So it's by being consistent, which directly relates to what you just shared, knowing how this person's going to respond, but other people being able to trust you because you are consistent, being competent and showing that you have the capability to achieve whatever it is they're entrusting you with, and then to be caring. So the consistency part is, very often I will encourage my clients to add in an extra sentence when they're delivering something to someone to say, as promised. As promised, here's the XYZ. As promised, here's blah, blah, blah. As promised. So you're building up the awareness in the other person that when they give you something, you can be trusted. You are delivering as promised. The competence piece is about asking. If you're not clear at the beginning of a project, don't be afraid to ask then. And if you are the one giving the project, so you're the leader delegating something, don't be afraid to ask. This is what we need to do, have done by this date. Can you tell me a little bit about what would be the first 1 or 2 steps you would take in order to achieve that outcome? And just see if they're on the right path, because sometimes they're too scared to speak up, to say, I didn't understand what you're saying, and they go off on a tangent, and then a week later when you're checking in, they've got no clue what they're doing. And you've wasted time, right? And then the caring part is about really hearing people and acting on what they're telling you. So if you're saying, you need to be more, planful as a leader, going back to the person after you've reflected on that feedback and saying, you told me that you'd like me you'd like to see me being more planful. Here's what I'm going to do with that information. Here's what I'm changing. Or I can't change this, but I can do this. And it demonstrates that you're listening and you're engaged with them. So it's three
Oh, that's
C's.
beautiful. Three C's. I like that. Yeah, definitely consistent is nice. And, you know, we're women, so that's not always possible, but we do our best, right? Being
It's
consistent.
not the fact that I would say it's not the fact that people mess something up, because we're all human, right? And yeah, we have bad days of PMS or whatever you want to call it. It's how you handle it afterwards that's going to save or destroy the relationship. If you be accountable for it right away, you own that there was an issue and it was your issue. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Here's what I'm going to do to make sure it never happens again and it won't erode our trust. You know, will you give me another chance? Basically, is what you're saying, by demonstrating how you are going to make sure that that relationship is taken care of, even though something went sideways.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that actually being with the discomfort of working through those difficult conversations to own your responsibility for things and, you know, and to reach out, you know, like it, I think that as you know, like I have a situation right now where I reached out, you know, because I feel like we have to build, if we're capable of building a bridge, let's say you have a certain level of confidence and a certain level of self-love, then I feel like it's your responsibility to build a bridge, you know, with somebody who's maybe is acting as if they don't have that same level, you know, like they're maybe not quite there, or they're in a different place where they're maybe got some self-judgment or some comparison or something going on, who knows what it is, that's
Mm-hmm.
building a wall instead of a bridge, you know,
Yeah.
then I think that we can lean in a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very easy, particularly when I'm speaking with another woman, to say, what I'm picking up from your energy or from your words or from your conversation or from, you know, what I'm observing is, you know, possibly not what's going on. So, you know, here's what I'm feeling. Is that how it was intended? Or is that what was meant by that remark or that conversation or that action? And just bring it to the spotlight and see if, no judgment, but see if I'm interpreting it correctly. And if you frame it in that gentle, more gentle manner, it's not an accusation, it's not a criticism or judgment. There is usually receptivity to actually saying, oh, really? I didn't think it was coming across like that. What I meant was X, Y, Z. Great, we've clarified the communication. No one's making assumptions, because it's very easy to do that.
Yeah, I can really see how your upbringing has helped you to be very perceptive and fine-tuned with your communication, because that is tricky ground to walk. You've got a parent who's super critical. Woo!
It's been
It can be tense.
25 plus years in different roles. When I first came to Canada from England, I was in a sales role and hiring and training sales reps in the educational field. And then when that role, when I met my now ex-husband, I took an office administration role with a startup, an IT startup. And I realized through that a lot of times people come to the table with an idea of what they want to automate with technology, but they don't really know what it's going to look like until you actually mock it up and then you show it to them and they say, oh no, that's not what I meant. I didn't think it was going to look like that. So there's this translation between an idea and what is a solution for it, and there's middle ground, and that's where the magic can happen if it's managed well. And then I had that role morph into human resources, because we were attracting and hiring a ton of people because it was great success as an IT company, and someone needed to look after those people that you know, we'd spent hours and hours hiring and reference checking and bringing on board. So it morphed into an HR role. So over the course of my career, with the HR role, with then, you know, working for this global talent management company in a VP role, doing my executive coaching specifically with women in the last 10 years, all of those experiences, I've interviewed and hired about 6,000 people in my career. A lot of it has been working over the phone. I do a lot of coaching work now over the phone or over Zoom. So I really have to listen carefully, because if you're on the phone and you're not seeing the visual, how are you interpreting what they're really saying about how they're feeling? especially in a coaching situation. So
Yeah, very true.
active listening.
Active listening. I've also had to learn how to do that early on just to avoid punishment. active,
Me too.
active listening. So
Yep.
very, very good motivation.
I've had to let go too. Yep.
Well, good. So how do people get started with you, Yvonne? Do you have a download or something that people get started with you?
Yep, absolutely. The best place to go to stay connected and also, learn a little more and get a taste of what I do is to go to my website, which is Words, Women, and Wisdom. Except instead of the ampersand, it's AND spelled out, wordswomenandwisdom.com. There's a couple of things on there. There is if you're interested to learn more about what's in the book, there's the launch video is still running on there. If you sign up where it has the window saying have a joyful 2019, you actually have an opportunity to do a couple of assessments, and I will also download a 3-chapter excerpt as an ebook of a portion of my book, so you can get some of the first 3 chapters and take some of these learnings away in a deeper level.
Awesome. That is great. Thank you so much for sharing that gift with our audience. And I know that is your podcast on iTunes?
It is on iTunes. So I host a Words, Women, and Wisdom radio show, which actually syndicates to 110 different stations, and it's popping up on iTunes, iHeartRadio as well. So that is something that you can just search on, BBS Radio Yvonne Silver, or the Words, Women, and Wisdom show, and hear more
Awesome.
about. There's a couple of clicks on my website too for that.
And I will put a link to that in the show notes for to make that easy. But as we close up the show, I really recommend that you guys out there listening, that you go and subscribe, to Yvonne's podcast, and I'll put a link to that so you can go do that. Go check out her book, get the download, and because we can all learn so much from each other. There's just so much. There's different areas of expertise and different nuances that we can learn from each other, and I always like to fill up my tank with wisdom from other women, just so that I can really be even more powerful.
Well,
even more powerful hummingbird.
I mean, typically, I'm working with women who are either women entrepreneurs or corporate women leaders, women who want to lead in some capacity. And there's just so much opportunity to really advance that with confident and powerful conversation. So that's the essence of the work I do.
Absolutely. It's so important too, because we want to make an impact. We need to make an impact in the world right now. And so we need to be courageous and step up and speak. And it's great to have, these tools and wisdom for how to speak effectively to be heard. That's the next piece. So we want to speak, we've got to be heard.
The last thing I just want to mention is, this is all very much, your show is very much about, being conscious, being aware, nurturing the world. So for every copy that is purchased of the book, I am donating a copy to a Women's Shelter Foundation or not-for-profit. And so that, the women that really, really need to elevate their confidence can access the book as well. And it just fills my heart when I'm able to go and donate a stack of 10 books. So I'm doing that this month at a gala for an organization called Making Changes here in Calgary, who supports women getting attire to go out and have a great interview and feel more confident, and support social agencies that have women coming through who need that boost of confidence. So it's cool.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for doing that. That's gorgeous. So definitely go get Yvonne's book, and that way there'll be a copy donated to help other women who are needing to be lifted up. We have some organizations like that here too in the United States. So
Yeah.
beautiful work. And I want to just say to everybody, be sure to like and subscribe, as I said, and definitely like and subscribe to Soul Nectar Show on iTunes to help us to get more ratings and up there. More people can find the podcast. It's just how they work on their algorithms. Is if you like and subscribe and leave a comment, it just boosts it up in the algorithm. So thank you for helping us with that. And I'm going to give kisses to Yvonne. So if you want to join us, give some kisses. That'd be great.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the show. I love your work, love what you're doing. I also have a butterfly tattooed on my back. You can't
Oh,
see
nice.
it. Felt that connection right away when we first got talking many months ago. So, kisses.
Beautiful. Yeah, here come kisses. Okay, here they come, everybody. Till next time. See you next week on Soul Nectar Show, everybody. Bye
Thanks.
for now.
Okay. Bye, everybody.